I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine that I thought was rather entertaining. The conversation was inspired by one of Styx Hexenhammer's recent videos, and it went a little something like this. We were discussing policing in America, and my friend was very insistent upon the fact that racism was at least partially to blame for the differences in incarceration rates between whites and blacks in America for low-level drug crimes, misdemeanors and smoking a joint, stuff of that nature. And instead of contradicting her, telling her that she was wrong or that no, racism isn't the problem, I merely pointed out the fact that police in America are extremely sexist. And she was like, huh? What do you mean? And I told her, well over 90% of the people who are arrested in America are men. And so, by that logic, it means that American police are terribly sexist, and we need to do something to fix that problem. And she didn't really like that line of reasoning. She started protesting. She was like, no, well, I mean, you can't say that because men commit way more crimes than women, and so you have to look at... And then she kind of trailed off as the implications of what she was arguing hit her. This moment was my absolute favorite in this discussion, and it made it quite entertaining for me personally. I imagine it might be what Jordan Peterson felt during this moment with his interview with Kathy Newman.
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. Like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
So you haven't sat there and... I'm just trying to work that out. I mean...
And so the implications of what I'm saying are, of course, that African Americans are incarcerated at a much higher rates than whites are because they commit, statistically speaking, more crimes than white people do. And this isn't just something that I'm pulling out of my ass. I mean, if we look at the best available statistics that we have, which come from the U.S. Department of Justice, we go to Table 1 and we see that U.S. resident population as of July 1st, 2018. We see that whites make up 60.4% of the population, and they commit nearly 46% of all the non-fatal violent crimes. And if we look at blacks, we see that they are 12.5% of the population, and yet they commit a third of all non-fatal violent crimes. That is an impressive rate of overrepresentation, only topped by the homicide data. Here, we can see that black or African American make up 52.4% of all the murders that took place in 2018. I mean, let that sink in. And I don't want what I'm saying here to be misconstrued as me wanting to shit on black people or me to trying to, somehow justify hate for them or anything like that. I'm not doing anything of the sort. And nothing I'm saying here, when we're speaking about groups and group statistics, should be taken as me arguing for how one should treat individuals in any way, shape, or form. The reason that I am pulling up these statistics is to point out that the reason blacks in America are incarcerated at a much higher rate than whites are is because they commit a lot more of the crimes. There are discussions to be had about why this is the case. I think there are certainly historical reasons for why we see poverty in a lot of black communities in America. But most of the people who are murdered by African Americans in the United States are African American. I think it's something like 80% of the murder victims in the murders carried out by African Americans are other African Americans. And so this isn't really an issue that you can merely say, oh, it's because of racist cops that this is the way that it is. I mean, no. The reasons why these things are the way they are much more complicated than that. And you're really not going to get very far in an analysis of what's going on in American society now, and you're really not going to be able to find any workable solutions if racism is the lens through which you see all interactions in America. And so that's pretty much how the conversation went. I would recommend trying it with somebody you know. If you don't care very much about the outcome, it can be fun. Later.